If it weren't for the dog, the wedding would have gone off without a hitch. The setting was perfect. A sun-drenched lawn at the Magnolia Estate in Charleston, South Carolina. Rows of white chairs nestled beneath centuries-old oak trees draped in Spanish moss, a gentle breeze rustling through lavender sprigs tied to mason jars. Everything spoke of love, tradition, and Southern charm. Caleb Montgomery stood tall in his navy suit, a picture of calm and confidence, until the moment his bride appeared at the edge of the aisle. She was stunning. Lucia Navarro, in a gown of ivory lace and a veil that caught the light just so, stepped forward. And that's when it happened. A single bark split the silence. It wasn't playful. It wasn't confused. It was sharp, fierce, and unrelenting. A growl full of fury, a sound that stopped the music, silenced the chatter, and turned heads in unison. All eyes followed the source of the sound, a German shepherd named Lupo, straining at his leash with a desperation that felt almost human. At first, a few nervous laughs broke the tension. Someone whispered, "He's probably afraid of white dresses." But the laughter died quickly when Lupo lunged forward, snarling as if he'd spotted a threat only he could see. "Whose dog is that?" Lucia asked, her voice sweet but edged, with something brittle. "He's mine," Caleb answered quietly, his eyes never leaving the dog. Lupo had been his best friend for years, loyal, steady, protective, and never like this, never aggressive. Evan, Caleb's younger brother, tried to restrain him, tugging at the leash and calling out, "Lupo, sit, sit." But the dog wouldn't. Bay. His eyes stayed locked on the bride, not the guests, not the officiant, just her. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Guests shifted in their chairs. A few began filming again, unsure whether this was a bizarre hiccup or something more. Caleb looked down at Lupo, torn between love and logic. This didn't make sense. Lupo wasn't like this. Eventually, with great effort, Evan dragged the dog toward the manor house. Silence returned, but not peace. The air had shifted. Something invisible had cracked. Lucia resumed her walk down the aisle, her face composed, too composed. Judith, Caleb's mother, leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Did you see her reaction? No flinch, no surprise, just calculation." And in that fleeting moment of instinct, raw, unfiltered, undeniable, a wedding turned into a question. Not about flowers or vows, but about truth. About what one dog knew, and why he was trying so desperately to warn the man he loved. The wedding resumed. Lucia, elegant and unbothered, walked the remaining stretch down the aisle. She took Caleb's hands, smiled with ease, and spoke her vows as though a snarling dog hadn't just accused her of something unspeakable. Guests applauded. Rings were exchanged, and Caleb tried to push down the weight that had settled in his chest. But the moment never quite recovered. Inside the manor house, Lupo had not calmed. He clawed at the wooden door of the guest room where Evan had left him, his claws leaving faint marks on the polished finish. His pacing was frantic, as if trapped not by walls, but by urgency. Outside, the sun dipped lower in the sky. String. Lights flickered on above the reception tables, casting a golden hue over clinking glasses and cheerful toasts. "Can we let the dog out now?" One staff member asked Caleb quietly as he passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Caleb hesitated. He looked toward the house, then at his wife. No, his bride. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think so." Lupo didn't come to him when released. Instead, he bolted for the stairs, past guests, past the clinking glasses and polite smiles, toward the second floor, where Lucia had gone minutes earlier to fix her makeup. He stopped only when he reached the hallway outside the bridal suite, body rigid, ears forward, his entire frame vibrating with restrained energy. When Lucia returned, nothing about her demeanor had changed. She smiled at guests, accepted compliments, about her grace under pressure, and even knelt briefly to pet Lupo. He did not move, did not blink, His eyes tracked her every movement with the precision of a soldier on high alert. Judith Montgomery noticed everything. A retired prosecutor, she had spent decades reading the smallest signs, flickers of hesitation, feigned confusion, smiles too perfect to trust. As she watched Lucia, Judith felt the tickle of something cold brushing against her instincts. It wasn't just Lupo's reaction, it was Lucia's lack of one. No fear, no confusion, just smooth, polished control. She excused herself from the dance floor and headed upstairs, retracing the path Lucia had taken. The hallway was dim, the windows still glowing with the last light of the day. A photograph lay face down on the hardwood floor. A family portrait once hung above a side table. Had it fallen or been knocked down? Judith picked it up, her fingers brushing against the rough edges of the frame. Something about the backing felt off, too loose, too new. Carefully, she peeled it back. Tucked behind the cardboard backing was a piece of folded paper, yellowed slightly at the edges, but recent enough to matter. She unfolded it slowly. Her eyes scanned the contents. Names, bank account numbers, initials. It was a list, discreet but damning, and one name in particular leapt off the page: Isabella Gomez. Beneath it, a note. Handwritten in tight, precise print. Finalize account transfer post-ceremony. No delays. Judith froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head slowly toward the closed door at the end of the hallway, the bridal suite. Lucia, Navarro, or whoever she was. Judith's hands trembled as she folded the paper and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, the music played on. Caleb spun his bride under the fairy lights, smiling for the cameras. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, the reception dwindled. The guests left with party favors and buzzing speculation. Caleb lay awake in bed, Lucia curled against him, her breathing slow and steady. But Lupo paced the hallway, back and forth, back and forth. Occasionally he'd stop, nose pressed to the base of the bedroom door, and let out a low, persistent growl. Judith couldn't sleep either. In the dim light of the guest bedroom, she reviewed the list she'd found, again and again. She recognized one of the banks, and one of the names. There had been a case years ago involving stolen identities and siphoned wedding funds. The bride had disappeared. The groom was left bankrupt. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Should she call someone, Caleb, the authorities? Instead, she chose silence. For now, Lucia remained perfect the next day. Bright-eyed, playful, she danced in the kitchen barefoot wearing Caleb's shirt, flipping pancakes like it was any normal Sunday morning after a celebration. She joked about Lupo, calling him jealous, and suggested they visit the beach before their honeymoon flight. But Caleb had changed. Something inside him had shifted during the night, and he couldn't unhear the sound of Lupo growling. Couldn't forget the way Lucia's eyes had stayed. Dry, unmoved, he kissed her forehead, told her he'd be right behind her, and as soon as she left the room, he turned to Lupo. "You saw something," he whispered, kneeling beside the dog. "Didn't you?" He started his own search in the guest room where Lucia had prepared for the wedding. Most of her belongings were already moved to their shared suite, but one suitcase remained under the bed, neatly zipped, untouched. Inside, dresses, a few cosmetics, and a small black makeup bag. Nothing alarming, at first glance. But when Caleb unzipped the inner pocket, his breath caught. A passport, different name. Different photo, Isabella Gomez, Venezuelan. It was Lucia's face, even if the hair in the photo was shorter, darker. He kept going. Beneath a hidden panel sewn into the lining of the suitcase, he found a flash drive taped flat. He slipped it into his laptop. It wasn't encrypted. Folders opened like wounds, labeled by city: Geneva, Dallas, Panama City. Inside, scanned documents, email screenshots, bank records. Each folder documented another life, another man, another wedding. She had done this before, more than once. Caleb didn't move, couldn't breathe. The room spun around him. She had kissed him like she meant it, held his hand through grief, promised him forever. And she had lied through every second. He walked out of the room in silence, heart hammering. Lupo followed close behind. Judith was waiting in the living room, a cup of untouched tea in her hand. "I found something," Caleb said, voice hoarse. He sat down beside her, opened the laptop, and let the truth pour out. "I think," Judith said after a long silence, "we've only just begun to understand who she really is." Caleb didn't sleep that night. The images on the flash drive haunted him, faces of grooms smiling in tuxedos, wedding photos full of joy and trust, and underneath it all, file names that screamed betrayal. Geneva, 2019, Dallas, 2021, Panama City, 2023. All different cities. But the woman in each photo? The same, Lucia or Isabella or whoever she really was. By 2 a.m., Lupo had settled outside the bedroom door again, his body still but tense, as if on guard. Inside, Lucia slept peacefully, her hand draped over Caleb's chest, her breath warm against his shoulder. She looked like love. She felt like safety, but everything about her was now a question. When he finally slid her hand off him and crept out of bed, it wasn't fear that drove him. It was heartbreak. He found his mother awake, sitting in the guest room with the light dimmed low and the same list from earlier spread across the bed. She didn't look surprised when he entered. She just said, softly, "You couldn't sleep either." He showed her the passport, the flash drive. Her eyes scanned the screen quickly, her face impassive until she stopped at a familiar name in the documents, Montgomery Holdings. "She's already mapped out our financials," Caleb whispered. "She's planning something." Judith nodded once. "Then we need to be careful. Watch her. Don't confront her yet. We need more." The next morning, Lucia was vibrant, almost glowing. She hummed old Sinatra songs while making eggs, danced, barefoot across the tile floor in one of Caleb's oversized button-downs. If she sensed a shift, she didn't show it. In fact, she leaned into the role of the perfect new wife, warm, gracious, even affectionate. At one point, she asked, "Do you still want to go over the trust accounts today, darling?" That was the first time Caleb truly shivered. He nodded, smiled, played the part, but inside his heart raced. She was getting ready to move, and she thought he didn't see it coming. That afternoon, while she was out making calls to family, calls he knew now were just more theater, Caleb returned to the suitcase. He checked every seam, every pocket. This time he found something else. A folded sheet of handwritten numbers and codes, some of them linked to offshore accounts he recognized from the flash drive. She hadn't touched his money yet, but she was ready. And she wasn't just here for him. She was here for everything. That night, she slipped into the study alone. Caleb waited in the hallway, listening to the soft clack of keys on her laptop. He crept closer and peeked inside. On the screen, an offshore banking interface. And another window, Montgomery Holdings Plan Dixel SX. She wasn't planning a marriage, she was preparing a heist. Back in his room, Caleb sat in silence. Lupo curled beside him, alert and quiet. For once, the dog wasn't barking. He didn't need to. They both knew. The next day, Caleb asked Lucia to meet him in his late father's study, the one with the old leather chairs, the thick bookshelves, the wall safe where his dad used to keep legal documents. It felt symbolic. Full circle. Lucia arrived exactly on time, dressed in beige and pearls, like a woman about to attend a business meeting or walk into a courtroom. She smiled gently. "You said you wanted to talk about the finances?" He nodded. "About everything." She sat down, crossed her legs, folded her hands. "Of course." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive, setting it on the desk between them. "I found this." She didn't flinch, not a twitch. She looked at it calmly, then, "Back at him." "I know who you are," Caleb said. "Isabella Gomez, Geneva, Panama, Dallas. I read everything." A pause, long, dense with unspoken things. Then she leaned back and let out a slow breath. "Then I guess there's no more pretending." She didn't cry, didn't apologize. Her tone was level, cool, and somehow even more terrifying because of it. You were going to clean me out, he said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. I was, she replied. What stopped you? She turned her head slightly, her eyes drifting to the corner of the room, where Lupo sat, still and watchful. Him, she said. That damn dog. Wouldn't stop watching me. Lupo stood now, silent but alert. The sentinel. Caleb stared at her. You've done this before. 4 times, she said. That you know of. Why? Lucia, or Isabella, shrugged. Because men like you believe in fairy tales. You want the mystery woman. No past, no baggage. Just a smile and a good story. So when she shows up, you don't ask questions. I loved you, Caleb said, his voice breaking. No, she said softly. That part was real. That's what I didn't plan for. He didn't move, didn't speak, her words circled in his mind like smoke. So what now? She asked. You run to the police, or do we figure something out? He picked up the phone. From the desk. I already made the call. Outside, tires crunched against gravel. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. Her face changed then. Not panic, not rage. Just a flicker of sorrow. You turned me in, she whispered. You turned yourself in the day you said I do. She didn't resist. She walked out calmly when the agents entered. No tears, no fight. Just one last glance over her shoulder. Not of hatred, but something close to regret. Caleb stood at the window long after the vehicle disappeared. Lupo sat beside him, pressing his head gently against Caleb's hand. You were right, Caleb whispered. Lupo didn't bark. He just stayed close. That night, Caleb wandered the house like a stranger. The scent of her perfume still lingered, wedding gifts still unopened. Her suitcase still in the guest room. He unzipped it one last time. Inside, tucked between neatly folded clothes, was a letter. Caleb, if you're reading this, I already know how it ended. I never planned to fall. For you. That was my mistake, not the con, not the plan. Loving you broke everything. I'm sorry I couldn't be who you thought I was. Maybe I wish I had been. He read it twice, folded it carefully, and closed the suitcase. Then he turned to Lupo. Let's go home. The next morning, the house felt quieter than ever. 2 days had passed since the arrest, yet everything remained exactly as it had been, except Caleb. He had changed. The letter from Lucia, no, from Isabella, haunted him. It wasn't the confession. That unnerved him. It was the sorrow in her words, and that final line, maybe I wish I had been. He found himself walking the halls aimlessly, retracing steps they had taken together. Every room still bore her imprint. The study where she asked about trust accounts, the porch where she danced barefoot in his shirt, the bedroom where she had held him like they had forever. But what if that part had been real? Lupo followed him, room to room, tail low, head high. He didn't bark, but his ears twitched constantly. Something in the air still felt off, unsettled. That evening, Caleb sat at his desk with the flash drive again. He scrolled through the files, this time not looking for evidence but answers. Among the folders was one named Legacy. He hadn't opened it before. Inside there were letters, drafts of them, unsent emails, Word documents filled with raw, vulnerable lines that didn't sound like a con artist at all. They sounded like someone drowning. Sometimes I forget who I am, or who I was supposed to be. I make up names now and try them on like clothes, but none of them fit. Not really. Another one read, He looks at me like I'm made of light, and I don't know how to live in the sun. Caleb stared at the screen. Slowly, a different shape of the woman emerged. Not the calculated thief, but the wounded survivor. Someone who had built walls so high, even she couldn't see over them anymore. Later that night, he received a call from the State Department contact his mother had reached out to. They were taking the case seriously now. A wider investigation had begun. Multiple aliases, international movement of funds. She wasn't just a one-time offender. She was a key piece in a much larger operation. but she's also cooperating, the agent said. So far, she's given us a lot. Will she get out? Caleb asked quietly. Depends on the truth, on what else we find. The truth. That word sat with him long after the call ended. The following day, Caleb drove to the detention center. He wasn't sure what he would say or whether she would even agree to see him. But she did. Through the thick security glass, she looked different. No makeup, no pretense. Her hair was pulled back simply, her eyes darker than he remembered. Not from deceit, but exhaustion. I didn't expect you, she said, lifting the phone on her side. I didn't expect a lot of things, he replied. Like finding the locket or the name Liana, her eyes closed briefly. So you know. I know enough. She nodded, swallowed hard. You must hate me. I did, Caleb said. But now, I'm trying to understand you. She blinked quickly, like fighting something behind her eyes. I was 16, she began quietly, when they dropped me in a state home. Said my mom was dead, no funeral, just a trash bag of clothes and a new name. I didn't choose this path. It was survival, one identity after another, one lie after another. But then I met you, and it felt different. You could have told me. I wanted to, but I didn't know how to stop hiding. Silence settled between them, thick but not hostile. For the first time, they weren't adversaries. Just two people staring at the wreckage of what could have been. Why did you come? She asked softly. Caleb hesitated. Because the dog never stopped barking, and now I know why. Later that day, back home, Caleb returned to the guest room one last time. Most of her things had been taken as evidence, but a small jewelry box remained in the top drawer. Inside it, a gold locket. He hadn't seen it before. On the back, engraved initials LG, not Lucia, not Isabella. Something else. He opened it. Inside were two tiny photos. One, a man in a military uniform. The other, a young girl. 6, maybe 7. The resemblance was striking. On a hunch, Caleb opened his laptop and typed in the name engraved at the clasp's edge. Liana Gomez. The search results came quickly. Missing person, Houston, age 17, disappeared from foster care. Closed. Case. No leads, but it was her, not Lucia, not Isabella, Liana, not a con artist, at least not entirely. A lost girl. Forgotten. Used. Vanished into the cracks. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep again. At 3 a.m., Lupo growled sharply and darted down the hallway. Caleb followed him to the built-in shelves in the upstairs office. Lupo began scratching at the wood. Something was behind it. Caleb grabbed a screwdriver and pried open a panel. Inside, a hidden cavity, a manila envelope. He pulled it out. Inside were court documents, letters, torn records. One from a private adoption agency. Another stamped. State of Texas termination of parental rights. A medical record from a psychiatric facility. And one final photo. Liana as a child, standing beside a woman in uniform. The name tag read, Officer M. Navarro. She wasn't just running from the law, she had been running her whole life. Caleb sat with it all. The truth no one had ever asked her to tell. The pieces no one had tried to connect. The lies weren't born from greed, they were stitched together out of trauma, out of pain, out of a need to survive. The next morning, he returned to the detention center. She looked up, surprised. Found the envelope, he said, her eyes widened. Navarro? He asked. Was she your mother? Liana, he could finally call her that now, nodded slowly. She was my everything, until the system decided a cop couldn't raise a child alone. They took me away. He said nothing, just listened. They said she didn't fight hard enough. But she did. I know she did. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the photo. She wrote you a letter, he said. It was in the envelope. Liana's hands shook as she held it. She said if you were ever found, that you were loved, that you were her daughter, that you were her heart. Tears welled in her eyes for the first time. But they didn't. fall. She just clutched the photo like something sacred. "You came all this way," she whispered. "I told you," Caleb said, his voice rough. "I'm trying to understand you." And in that cold, quiet room, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. The first fragile root of something that might one day grow into redemption. The days that followed moved slowly, like time itself was holding its breath. Leanna had been transferred to a secure facility under protective custody. The FBI had determined her testimony could bring down an entire ring, an international network, of identity theft, human smuggling, and financial fraud stretching across multiple states and borders. And she was the first to talk. But it also meant she had become a target. Caleb, back at the Montgomery estate, felt the weight of her absence. The house, once filled with music, laughter, and even lies, now echoed with silence. The scent of her perfume had faded, but her memory lingered in the curve of every chair she touched, every room she once passed through. Lupo never strayed far. From him, the dog followed Caleb everywhere, into the kitchen, the garden, the study, as if still on high alert. One morning, while sipping coffee on the back porch, Caleb noticed something odd in the mailbox. A plain, unmarked envelope. No return address, no stamps, just left there, deliberate and silent. Inside, a photo. A young woman, Leanna, standing alone at a train station. Scared, maybe 17. Red ink scrawled across the image. "She's not who you think. Stay out of this." Caleb stared at it for a long time. The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was clear. Someone from her past didn't want the truth coming out. He brought the envelope to the local police. They brushed it off. "Could be from one of the victims," the officer said. "Or someone just trying to scare you. These things happen." But Caleb knew better. That night, Lupo barked at the fence line. When Caleb checked, the side gate, usually locked, was ajar. He fixed it, then sat by the window until dawn. The next morning, muddy footprints appeared near the back porch. Large, heavy. Someone had been watching. Meanwhile, Leanna was changing. Too. Caleb visited her weekly, each time finding her less guarded, more herself. Her hair had returned to its natural color. Her posture was quieter, her voice steadier. She looked less like a phantom and more like a survivor. "I think someone from my past knows where I am," she said one day through the glass. "Who?" "There were men I worked with, back when I was really desperate. They forged identities, moved people across borders. I was just a tool to them. Now they think I'm a liability." "And you are," Caleb said. "I already gave your lawyer everything, names, places, documents. They know I talked." She looked at him, guilt shadowing her expression. "I never meant to bring this to your door." "But you did," Caleb replied. Then softer, "But I'm still here." She pressed her hand against the glass. He didn't ask why. He just pressed his hand against hers. That night, Caleb installed floodlights and surveillance cameras around the property. The house became a fortress. Lupo slept with one ear open, always ready. At 2:47 a.m., an alert pinged from the backyard camera. Movement detected. Caleb grabbed a flashlight and opened the back door quietly. Lupo stood beside him, low growl humming, his throat. Across the yard, just at the edge of the trees, stood a man in a hooded coat, watching, not moving. Caleb froze. Lupo did not. The German Shepherd shot off the porch, barking with thunderous rage. The man bolted. Caleb shouted. Lupo chased. By the time police arrived, the intruder was gone. But the footprints remained. Tire tracks, cigarette butts, and an open gate told a clear story. Someone wasn't just threatening them anymore. They were close. The next day, Caleb received another envelope. This one contained a torn piece of newspaper from 2009. Headline: "Teen runaway tied to ID theft ring in Texas." A grainy photo of Leanna, barely more than a girl, stared out from the page. Red ink again. You were warned. This time, Caleb didn't call the local police. He went straight to the FBI. In a sterile conference room downtown, he laid everything out. Photos, envelopes, video footage, timestamps. The agents listened, took notes, and finally admitted what he had suspected all along. There's a group operating out of Florida and South Texas, one agent said. They move people, forge identities, create fake marriages for financial gain and legal status. Liana was one of their pawns. She wasn't running it, Caleb asked. No, she was used, groomed, then trained. But now she's the first one to flip, and that makes her dangerous. To them. The agent leaned in. She's not just your wife, Mr. Montgomery, she's a target. Later that day, Caleb sat on the front steps with Lupo, watching the sun dip behind the magnolia trees. I don't know where this ends, he said softly. Lupo rested his head against Caleb's knee. But I do know we're not backing down. 3 days later, everything changed. At 11 p.m., Lupo jumped to his feet and growled. Caleb was already moving before the alarm sounded. The security system beeped. Driveway motion detected. He opened the camera feed. Headlights flashed once, then darkness. Then, a knock at the front door. Soft, rhythmic. He opened it slowly. Wasn't Liana. It was the FBI agent. She looked tired, grim. They tried to intercept the transport van, she said. Caleb's heart dropped. Did they? She's safe. But there's something you need to see. Inside, she handed him another sealed envelope. She wanted you to have this. She didn't know if she'd get the chance to say goodbye. He opened it. Inside, a photo, the same one from the locket. A young girl beside a woman in uniform, Officer M. Navarro. But this copy had something written on the back. Find her. Finish what I never could. The agent met Caleb's eyes. She wants to testify, but she also wants something more. She wants to find the woman in that photo, her mother, or the woman who tried to be. She thinks if anyone can do it, it's you, and that's how it began. Not a rescue, a restoration. Over the next few weeks, Caleb poured every resource he had into the search. With help from the FBI, he traced old foster records, scanned forgotten files, followed leads across 3 states. Lupo was with him every mile. In a quiet town outside Atlanta, they finally found her, Margaret Navarro. She lived in a small retirement home by the lake, hands trembling, voice soft from age and sorrow. But her eyes were sharp when Caleb handed her. The photo, that's my baby, she whispered. They told me she ran away, that she didn't want to see me again. She never stopped looking, Caleb said. They just made sure she never found you. The reunion was quiet. No cameras, no press. Just 2 women, broken and bruised by the system, holding each other. In the corner of a fading afternoon, Lupo sat between them, tail thumping gently against the floor, and for the first time in years, Liana Navarro came home. Summer came slowly that year. After the trial, Liana walked out of the courthouse a free woman. No aliases, no masks, no lies. The judge had granted supervised release and full immunity for her testimony in upcoming prosecutions. Justice wasn't blind this time. It had listened. Outside, Caleb waited by the courthouse steps. Lupo stood beside him, tail wagging, ears alert. The moment Liana appeared, the German Shepherd barked once, sharp, joyful, familiar. She knelt to the ground, arms open, and Lupo rushed in, burying his face against her chest. I missed you, boy, she whispered, tears soaking into his fur. Caleb watched from a few steps away. He didn't move, didn't speak. He didn't need to. She stood slowly and met his eyes, not with a smile but with a question. He answered it by taking her hand. That summer, they planted a live oak in the backyard, a symbol of resilience. Lupo loved to nap in its shade, eyes half-lidded, tail flicking as birds danced in the branches above. Sometimes Liana would sit nearby, reading quietly. Other times, she walked barefoot through the garden she had started from scratch. Tomatoes, mint, sunflowers climbing up the fence. She had found peace, not because the past was erased, but because it had finally been acknowledged. Leanna began, volunteering at a local shelter, working with girls like her, runaways, survivors, kids stuck in systems that never saw them. She never told them everything, but she always listened, and sometimes that was enough. Caleb returned to work, but he came home earlier now. He cooked more, he listened better. He laughed again, but slower, softer, like every joy had been hard-earned. And every evening, as the sky turned golden behind the hills, Lupo took his place on the porch steps, guarding the home they had built together. But peace, like memory, is fragile. One evening, as the breeze rustled the trees and the wind chimes danced, the phone rang. No caller ID, just one ring. Then silence. The next day, a letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a single line on plain paper. "You're not done yet." Caleb looked out across the yard where Leanna knelt tending basil, and Lupo sat by her side, alert again. Watching the wind, he folded the letter slowly, then whispered, "Neither are we." Because sometimes the hardest part of healing is knowing the world might still come knocking, and you have to be ready to answer. Together. To be continued.